So everyone has a fear response, right? So if a bear were to walk in through here, we would have people drop to the ground and freeze. I would be out the door. We also have people who would probably stand up and start yelling at the bear and go after the bear, right? We have people who would like maybe lay down and roll over, right? So we have freeze, which is I'm just gonna stay like this and hope that nobody sees me, right? We have freeze, we have flight, which is running. We have fight. We also have submit. This one doesn't get talked about as much, and you will see this a lot when we're talking about domestic violence or kids who grow up in an abusive home and identify with the person who's abusing them, is instead of their fear response is, I am going to align myself with who's attacking me in the hopes that they'll stop attacking me. So when you see, and I hate hearing, oh, why doesn't she just leave, right? Because she's in a submit position. She is doing what she is instinctually, her body is making her do to try to be safe, right? Because leaving is really scary. What if he finds me? What happens when I try to leave? Where am I gonna go? Who's gonna support me? What are people gonna think of me when I leave and they find out that I'm getting abused, right? And it's the same thing with kids. It's in all abuse situations that happens. So when you hear of someone who hasn't left an abusive situation or who didn't talk about it right away, who didn't get abused and then run around going, I got abused, somebody help me, right? Think about that fear response. What fear response were they having that kept them from speaking out? So that's my little thing there. So trauma is what happens, though, when your fear response never turns off. So that bear can come in here. We'll all have our fear responses. And the next day, some of us will be like, oh, wow, that was crazy. I can't believe that happened. Some of us will be like, doing a Snapchat about it, whatever. Some of us, though, won't want to go back into a church building, because our body still thinks that bear is gonna come in, and we'll be scared to come back in. And even though we know that was a freak accident, the bear's never gonna come back, we're totally safe here, they put bear fencing up so no bear's ever gonna come in here again, our body still thinks that the bear is here and still thinks we have to be scared. And that is what trauma is. So even when you're out of the scary situation, your body, your brain is still telling you, be on alert, be scared, and that's exhausting. And that's why it becomes a mental disorder, is because that feeling, that trigger of your amygdala, it's the amygdala part of your brain that sets off it makes your muscles tighten, it gets you like this, and you're like ready to fight, right? That doesn't turn off. So you feel like that all the time, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So that's what trauma is.
Right, so when working with teens and kids, I explain that as it's your body's alarm system, right? So your body has a built-in alarm system, and it's either gonna tell you that you are experiencing danger or not, and sometimes you get some false alarms. So some false alarms, if you hear an ambulance going down the street right now and you're healthy, you're gonna be like, oh, that's not for me, that's for somebody else, right? But your body's alarm system is gonna increase in heart rate. You're gonna be feeling panic. You're gonna think that you're in danger when you're really not in danger anymore. You're gonna be easily started, possibly, okay? And this could also lead to some self-destructive behavior or intrusive thoughts. So your brain is just gonna start thinking all of these things. That's not even true, because your body's alarm system is going off. I kind of talked about this a little bit too. You're gonna develop a hurtful belief system, like what Rachel just said. There could be protections in place, but your brain, your body is going to function from, well, I was hurt, I was scared, I was this, I was that, and that's where your core belief system is going to operate from. And what we would try to do in therapy is help you to build what I call a helpful belief system, right? And we can do that through like reframing, teaching you some coping strategies to be able to calm your body, calm your mind. What does that look like? Trauma also makes you change your behavior. It makes you change your behavior. Well, I'm not gonna drive this way because I got into an accident on that road and I'm not going that way anymore, okay? And I just wanna like really quickly share like what happened to me a couple months ago. So my daughter went on a missions trip to Brazil. She was gone for 11 days. And the night that I had to go pick her up, I left home. I'm driving up 91, getting my praise and worship on, minding my own business. Ooh, bless you. All right, that might be a trauma response right
Yeah,
there.
my hyper-arousal just went off. Jeez. That's what trauma feels like, that feeling that made you jump. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Right, so I'm driving up 91 to pick her up, and I came across a motorcycle accident. Now, I didn't see it happen. I just came across the aftermath of that accident. And for like a week or two, every time I heard a motorcycle and I was driving in my car, I was like, because my body was remembering what happened when my brain was not even thinking about it. Okay, so that's what a trauma response would look like. And also change in worldview. I can't do this. If I do this, that. The world is not a safe place, etc.
That's what trauma does, is it removes your sense of safety. So the world is now a dangerous place. So everything gets seen through a lens of, this is bad, something bad's gonna happen, this person's gonna do something bad, this bad thing is gonna, like all the time. It's like a lens that comes down over your eyes.
Absolutely. I already went to this. Oh, you can't really, can you guys read that or not so much? So this is how trauma impacts marriages. Okay, so now I only have a few things here, but trauma shows up in your marriage in so many different ways. Some ways that I have identified is through communication, right? You're gonna shut down, you're gonna ignore, you're gonna wanna disassociate, you might even yell at your spouse. Your communication skills just go completely far out the window because you might be in fight mode. I gotta fight for this now. I have to fight to be able to communicate. Control. You might want things to be done a certain way. You might not consider your spouse's thoughts or concerns because you know that you need it done a certain way to stay safe. Intimacy, difficulty with connection. You're gonna be guarded. You're going to lack being able to communicate in your spouse's love language. Emotional regulation. You might not be able to control your temper. You might lose sense of self-control. There's not going to be any practicing of distress tolerance strategies. You might be angry all of the time. Emotional distance. You can't engage with your spouse. You can't connect to their feelings. You might even be feeling unfulfilled. And what's avoidance? You don't want to talk about anything. Don't bring that over here. We're not talking about that. I'm not doing that. Not showing love or affection. Feelings of abandonment might come up. This is where trust issues are going to come into play. Lack of attachment. You're going to see your partner through a hurtful belief system. So prior to marriage, if you don't develop what I again call a helpful belief system, you can take the negatives of your trauma into your marriage and not even realize that that is what you are doing. Okay? I'm working with a couple where the wife, if she's washing dishes, her husband cannot sneak up behind her to give her a love tap or to give her a kiss or anything like that, because she perceives that still through a hurtful belief system from the trauma that happened to her. Okay. Where are we at? Self-esteem, low self-worth. You're going to engage in negative self-talk. You're going to feel like you're not good enough. Role reversal, not being positioned where God wants you to be in your marriage. You're going to be taking on roles that God has not designed and created for you to take on. And then parenting, it's going to be difficulty being authority figure as the parent, or difficulty having healthy bond with your child or children, being overprotective. Premarital counseling. Oh yeah, let's talk about that for just a minute. I forgot about that one. So premarital counseling, what's typically covered is communication, conflict resolution, finances, intimacy and affection, children or parenting, spirituality, family, in-laws, and relationship roles. So I pulled that from the Prepare and Enrich curriculum, which I'm not trained in. God willing, one day I could do that training so I can become trained and certified in that model. But some things... Some things for those that do premarital counseling, if I could just drop some nuggets for you to include if you feel comfortable. One, individual therapy to address past traumas. If either partner identifies any sort of past trauma, encourage them to engage in individual therapy. And it doesn't even have to be long-term. They can go in and do what we call brief solution-focused therapy. Several sessions, and then, be able to move on. Look at relationship patterns. How did you show up? If you've been in a previous relationship, how did you show up in those relationships? And what are you bringing in from your previous relationship that's now going to impact your current relationship? Also, triggers that can lead to conflict. This is a big one because sometimes if you have unresolved trauma, you're gonna be triggered and you're not even gonna realize why you're triggered. And then your spouse can say something or do something and it sends you into this downward spiral, and it's not even your spouse. It's what you're bringing into the marriage, right? It's that past trauma that you're bringing in. Any previous financial abuse, I put this one in here for those who may have been in a previous relationship where there was financial abuse, right? Where one's partner was taking complete control of the marriage. And I put this in here too because, again, if we're going to be building and opening these new churches, we're going to be dealing with people from all different backgrounds. And this is something that might be coming into the church. If there is a history of sexual trauma or domestic violence, again, just go into individual therapy to make sure that that doesn't affect your current marriage or relationship. Also, make sure that you have a helpful belief system about connection as well. Blended families. Be mindful that there are going to be individuals in your church who might be on a second marriage or might be marrying someone that already has kids, right? And how can you counsel them in that way? If that's outside of your scope of practice as someone who's providing premarital counseling, this might be a referral to an outside, like licensed marriage and family therapist to be able to help with that. Intimacy. I cannot stress this one enough. Intimacy with God first on an individual basis. First and foremost. So the hyphen, for any hyphen that are here, your psychosocial stage of development, what you're trying to achieve is love. You are looking for connection. You are looking for a deep, meaningful connection with the opposite sex. You're thinking about wanting to settle down and get married and have kids. I encourage you to make sure that your relationship with Christ first, and you know what intimacy with is like God first. Right. Because if you would go into a relationship and your body's gonna start doing all these things and you're gonna be like, oh, I must be in love. This person gotta be the one for me because I'm feeling all of these things when God don't even want you in that relationship. Amen. Hear it. Okay? So make sure you spend time with God. Your relationship with God is on a firm foundation. You have intimacy with him. And then he's going to show you who your spouse is supposed to be. So when your spouse does come along, you're going to be like, oh, okay, he or she is it. I'm going to stay in my bubble. I'm going to stay in my corner until God says it's time for us to do what we need to do, right? Until it's time for me to make my move or what have you. And then you'll be able to bring that into your relationship and have a healthy marriage with intimacy with God, with your partner, and then each of you would be able to have intimacy individually with God as well. Also, family conflict and family history. If you arguing with your mama, if you and your daddy don't have a good relationship, guess what? That is going to impact your marriage. Right. Okay? It's going to, because as girls, we marry men that are like our fathers. I know I did. Both my dad is a driver, and so is my husband. Right? They both work on cars, right? So and for boys or for young men, you guys are going to marry women that are like your mom. Right?
It's weird, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's always true.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that my pastor's wife said years ago that always stuck with me is that I'm raising someone's future husband and I'm raising someone's future wife. I have 5 kids. I have 3 girls and 2 boys. And that's one of the things that have always stuck with me. So when you're going through premarital counseling, it's going to be important to look at the way that your family deals with conflict and your family history of dealing with conflict, okay? If your spouse or you've been in a previous relationship, what were some expectations and what were some difficulties that affected that relationship that you do not now want to bring into your marriage? How do you want to be able to handle those things in a healthy way? Relationship roles is on here too. Who's going to do what is talked about in the Prepare and Enrich curriculum, but for you, understanding the why, examining the why. Well, why do I do that? Why do I think this way? Why do I feel this way? Because it's not for no reason. People come in and they're like, I don't know why I do this, or I don't know why I do that. Let's talk about it. Because I'm sure we can figure out somewhere along the way, something happened, and you developed a belief system that says, I now need to do this thing this way. Right. All right, I'm done talking.
So I'm going to talk about how trauma affects the whole family. So families are people connected by threads of relationship. What happens to one part of the family affects the rest of the family. So if you think about it like a spider's web, right? If you pull on one thread, it's going to affect everything else. And when I do family work, I am not, usually what happens is the parents will come in and say, my kid is misbehaving. So I'll start working with the kid, and I don't even bother anymore. I just start doing the family work because it is never the one kid. It is the whole family system, right? It's that kid we call them the identified problem, but that's not usually the problem. It's not usually the one kid. They're a function of the whole system that they're in, right? And so when you're talking about trauma, when a trauma happens, it's going to affect the whole family. It's going to affect how the parents fight, how they communicate. It's going to affect how they communicate with the kids, right? So if you have a child who has been hurt by someone outside of the family, because talking about when trauma happens like within a family, that's like a whole other session. We need like 3 hours to talk about that. But so let's say like a child is hurt by something, is traumatized outside of the family system, right? So now you have parents who are feeling like failures. They're angry at themselves, at their spouse. Sometimes when there's a lot of research that shows that when a child dies in a family, half of the marriage is split up, and that's usually because they blame each other or one person gets blamed, right? And so you have to be able to navigate with each other, not blaming each other, right? Oh, you let them go to that sleepover. Oh, you let them go to public school. Oh, that was your brother, right? That if you want the family to survive, you have to find a way to forgive each other those things and to stay as a unit. Because the parents they are representative God to the kids. So the parents need to be a solid unit to get through the trauma, which is why you need to go to your own therapy and not just the family therapy, right? So and that's when a trauma happens to the child. So, and when a parent is absent, and I don't just mean like a single parent home, right? But when a parent is working all the time, when a parent is emotionally unavailable, when a parent is spiritually unavailable, right? If you have something happen in the family and the father isn't praying, isn't connected to God, isn't leading his family spiritually, all that burden falls on the mom to lead the family because the father isn't present. And also when the mom isn't spiritually connected, it all falls on the father, right? God designed it in a certain way, and that we have to hold to that way of having a family and having the family structure, even when there are hardships, because that's what's going to protect the family, right? So as the head of the household, you are responsible for holding on to that spiritual strength and holding on to God and being an example to the kids and to your wife that we are going to get through this because we're going to hold on to God, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk about generational curses too. So this goes beyond the family, right? This goes beyond your little nuclear family. And like we've been talking about, as we spread out, as we welcome more people into our churches, we're going to encounter families that are not conventional, right? And a lot of times the people that we're bringing to church, that's going to be the first encounter they have with God. So they have all of this family history behind them, right? I am a first generation Pentecostal. My parents are Lutheran. My grandfather was a Lutheran minister. I have generational trauma from my history, right? Because I won't go into it because you're not my therapist, but right. So I carry the baggage of families that were not raised in church, that weren't raised in truth. They were raised in a type of church, but they weren't raised in truth, right? And that carries a burden. And I'm going to carry that forward. We have conversations all the time about, I want to change how I respond to things because I don't want to carry forward that generational trauma. And so there's something called epigenetics. Does anybody know what epigenetics is? Well, you cheated. So epigenetics is where it's how your genes present. So it's not that your genes are getting changed, it's that the way the gene is being activated and presenting is affected by your environment, and it can be passed down. So this is a new area of study. It is still more correlational versus causational, but they are seeing enough that we are starting to see that trauma gets passed down from generation to generation. So they've done studies of survivors, children of the survivors of the Holocaust, and they can see higher blood pressure, higher levels of stress, a predisposition to anxiety, a predisposition to depression. That means they're more likely to develop those things in children of Holocaust survivors. The interesting thing is, after that generation, usually it's back to like the normal levels after one generation. But what they're also finding as they've broadened out their research pool is the descendants of slaves continue to carry forward those epigenetic, those markers. They continue to carry on the stress of their ancestors being slaves because it went on for so long, and because racism still exists today and they're still having to deal with it. And so those things are still carried forward. So people who are descendants of slaves have a higher rate of high blood pressure, cancer, heart attack, hypertension, and we can trace that back to their experience of trauma as slaves. We found the same thing in the descendants of Native Americans, especially the ones who were removed from their homes and sent to boarding schools. So these are, and I'm talking about these things because they're easier to study because it's huge groups of people, right? So this isn't like a one-off. This is like thousands of people that they've studied and tracked and done medical research on to see how trauma is carried forward in the generations. So bringing it back down here, when you think about a family coming in and the mom was raised by her grandmother, right? And she's a single mom, and she's got kids. You have 3 generations of trauma right there. You have kids who've been abandoned by their father. You have a mother who was abandoned by her parents, who was raised by somebody else, right? And think about all the layers there. And we know God is good. We know God can heal. But we need to be mindful of the context that these families are coming to us in and be supportive, right? So so I wanted you to know that everything I just shared actually came from research. That's the research. I didn't just make that up, right? Racial trauma is a real thing, sorry. So blended families, they're a reality in our churches. Oh, it got squished on my slide, I'm sorry. So according to the US Census, 70% of children under the age of 18 live with both parents. But that means 30% don't. So that's a quarter of the families a quarter of the children in our nation don't live with their biological parents. That means they're adopted. It means that they're living with like their grandparents. We see that so much. I see so many kids who live with their grandparents because the parents have their own issues and aren't able to parent. And these families are direct results of a rupture or a trauma. So think about what had to happen for that child to be raised by their grandparents. What does that mean, right? We know what that means. we know that something had to happen. Something bad had to happen. So that child is carrying that break in attachment, even if it happened at birth. There are so many studies that show that even kids who are adopted as infants carry the attachment trauma of being separated from their birth parents. It's sad. It's not a dig on adoption, right? It's just a reality. So when you're working with kids, when you're working with families, you have to take into context the whole picture. And I want you to pause and think about the language you use when you're working with blended families. When we say broken families, you're telling a child that they're broken. You're starting off by telling them you're not good enough and you're not what we want here. You're saying you're broken. Please stop using that word. Please stop using that word to describe families, right? They are doing the best they can. That grandparent is taking on raising a whole nother child when they've already had a traumatic experience with their first child. Because what had to happen for them to take on that grandchild, right? It means that their son or daughter is not able to take care of a child, right? They don't need to hear that they're broken. They already feel that way. So change the language you use when you talk about blended families. Blended families is softer, and it needs to be softer so that they feel safe with you, so that they feel welcomed with you, and they don't feel like they're being labeled. Okay, so not broken. There's just added layers is how I like to think of it, right? There's more layers going on there. And even if you never have a conversation with them about it, the way you interact with them, hold that in your mind, that this is a family that has added layers. I'm not just dealing with a person off the street. I'm dealing with a person who has a whole history that they're carrying with them into that building. So the view of the world is going to be different because they aren't seen as whole, and the world tells them that they are wrong, right? Even though the world has shifted and whatever, right, they're still often told you're wrong because you're a single parent. You're wrong because you're divorced and got remarried. Because you're not seen as, you're not the nuclear American dream family where you made a marriage work for 50, 60 years, right? So we have to be careful about what a good family is. And think about the kids sitting in your pews when you talk about what a good family is and what that means to them to hear that. And as ministers, we are often the ones who hear about these traumas, and it's up to us to protect these families in church from gossip and judgment. And it starts with you. So how you talk about a broken family is how your church is going to talk about a broken family. And it's how they're going to talk to those broken families when they come through the doors. So think about how you talk about people who are hurting and change that stigma, because if you're doing it from the pulpit, your ministry team will start doing it. And if your ministry team starts doing it, their staff will start doing it. And if their staff starts doing it, then the whole church is going to have a warm, safe place for these people to come to. Okay, so how do we break the curse? So I'm gonna give you guys some tools. So regulation. Regulation is keeping your body, keeping your brain regulated, right? It's like the AC. You don't want it up too high, you don't want it up too low. You want it in a place where you feel comfortable and calm. And everybody has kind of their own comfortable spot in their body. So I'm gonna have you guys check that right now. We've all been here for a little while. So I want you to wiggle around a little bit, stretch maybe. Okay, and I want you to put one hand on your chest, and we're gonna breathe in. See everybody doing it. I can see you all. All right, breathe in. So how you're feeling right now should be about what you want to feel when you're calm. So when you're not feeling this way, check in and go, what's up? Is my energy too low? Is my energy too high? What's going on? Regulate yourself. When you go in to counsel a family, when you go into an argument with your spouse, put a hand on your chest, take a couple breaths, get yourself to a place of calm so that your brain is able to think. When our body is going like this, we are not using our critical thinking part of our brain. We're using the way back here fear response, anger, fear, danger, 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 right? You want to turn off that alarm system. So that starts with breathing. God gave us breath. He gave us life by breathing into us. Breath is a tool. Use the breath to calm your body. So attunement is so once you've regulated yourself, you're then able to tune into the people around you. So what Shevonne was talking about earlier, how we can notice when somebody's off, it's because we have practiced this attunement so that we are really good at it. And I bet some of you are actually pretty good at it too. You just may not have the word for it, but you're able to tune into what other people are doing and how other people are feeling and reacting. Right? And so when you're in your family, you need to be able to attune to the people around you so that you know how to respond, right? So like, can I put us on blast? So when I'm annoyed with my husband, right, and I do it the way I should do it, and I take a deep breath and I tune in and I notice that, okay, he looks stressed. Now probably isn't the time to give him a hard time about the laundry, right? That's not a good time because he's stressed. I need him to be regulated before we can have an adult conversation. So, and we have our own way of communicating that with each other. Me telling him to go take a deep breath usually doesn't work. But we're working on actually teaching Rosie, our daughter, how to do that, right? So we tell her, let's take a breath together. Go take a deep breath. Let's go take space so that she can regulate and then but we're doing that because we're attuned to her. We know, oh, she's cranky because she's hungry, she's tired, she's a wet diaper, she had an accident, she wants TV and we're saying no, whatever, right? Because we're attuned to her. So attuning means you're tuning into the people around you. And then co-regulation, effective response, so we can help others by regulating with them rather than reacting. So instead of me going, why are you stressed? I work just as much as you, right? That's not helpful. So I can say, man, I think we're both in a bad mood. Maybe we both need to take a deep breath. And we do it together, and we regulate together. And I do that with Rosie. When Rosie takes a deep breath, I take a deep breath, because I probably need to calm down. So we're going to also give you some other coping skills in order to do all this, right? But this is kind of a formula for how to interact when you're feeling triggered, when you're feeling upset, and when you see other people feeling upset. Is this regulate yourself, tune in with how they're feeling, and then help all of you together get regulated. So that first one is that deep breathing. So a good deep breath is you're filling your lungs, you hold it for a second, and you let it out slow. And doing that at least 5 times. So we'll do that, and then I'm going to let you do some of yours. Okay, so we're going to breathe in, hold it, and let it out. Breathe in, and out. Try and go as slow as possible. Breathe in, and out. Breathe in. Chill. It's great.
My favorite coping strategy to teach kids, again, because I work with a lot of kids and adolescents, is the senses. It's a grounding technique. So it's like, what are 5 things you see? And I have them. So if you look around the church, what are 5 things that you can see right now? Okay, what are 4 things that you can touch? Right? 3 things that you can hear. Well, besides my voice, can you hear anything else? Yeah. Usually we can hear cars driving down the street, the air conditioner going, things like that. So I did smell. 2 things that you can smell. The diffuser is usually going in my office because there's days when we need it. So what can you smell? And then what can you taste? That's one of my favorite things to do with kids. And then also reframing. I love to teach kids how to reframe and how to challenge their thoughts. So okay, I'm not good enough. Okay, how do you know that? Where's the proof? What evidence do you have that you are not good enough? And usually they can't come up with any, right? Or if they say, well, I failed a test. I'm like, well, people encounter test anxiety. Like, that's okay, right? Or reframing, I'm not good enough. Well, the Bible says that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. The Bible tells me that I'm made in God's image, right? What scripture can you use to kind of combat what that thought is? There's so many more. There's a lot of coping
The
strategies.
reframing is great just for yourself, right? So if you feel yourself doing that circle thinking of, if I take a break, my church is going to fall apart, challenge that, right? Is that really true? Would I say that to somebody else? I love that one. If you're telling yourself a lot of negative things, say, would I tell this to somebody else? Like if I said this to someone else, how would I, right? So you're putting it out there and talking it out. The more you live in your own head, the worse it gets. Our own heads are the worst place to live sometimes. Talking it out, having somebody that you trust that you can talk it out with can be really, really helpful. The other one is honestly just movement, right? And I love this for kids with ADHD if they can't do the breathing, because a lot of kids with ADHD hate doing breathing, so I'll have so you get up and you go, okay, get as tall as you can. And you have them get their muscles really tight, and then you say, okay, go wet like a noodle, and you go, ugh. So making your body move. Get up and go for a walk. Go for a walk. That's what I would tell people during COVID when they were really stressed out, is go for a walk. You can be outside and not be scared. Go for a walk around your neighborhood, go to a park, go to a track at a school. School's not in, so nobody's there. Go walk. Go walk. Staying in one place, staying inside, you're trapping yourself with whatever thoughts or feelings you have. So these are things you can share with other people too. And again, this is stuff you share after you've listened, after you've validated, after you've sat with them when they're saying, okay, I'm ready for some advice now. I'm ready for some help now. These are the things that you can share.
I call that activity selection. Yeah. Yep, we're gonna sit and we're gonna write out some of the things that you like to do. And when you are in a mood, when you are feeling anxious, when you're having a difficult time, you're gonna select one of these activities and you're gonna try it out. But you actually have to do it. You just can't start and say, oh, this is boring, I don't wanna do it. You actually have to try it before moving on to the next thing.
Who here watches Bluey? Does anybody watch Bluey? Oh, I got a few hands. All right, okay. So there's an episode called Freeze Dance. That is my favorite game to have families do with their kids. But you, as the parent, have to participate. So everybody gets a chance to pick a song. You put a song on Spotify, and you do freeze dance. So one person gets to stand there with the phone and pause it while everybody else is dancing. But it gets you as a family. You're doing something fun together. There's no rules. They can be as silly as they want. You're getting body activation. You're also working on those kids' impulse control, because when that music stops, they have to stop their body, right? So they're also listening, and you're getting their impulse control to work. And they're feeling connected to you because you're doing it with them. So usually I don't let the parents control the phone. I let the kid control the phone at first, and then if you win, then you can switch and somebody else gets to control the phone. But it's really fun with bigger families even. And you make the parents dance, and I dance with them. I will dance with them. So if you're like working with a family, even if you're a pastor, like do a little boogie with them, right? Like dance it out, and help them to feel okay doing that with their kids, right? So that's another really good one for whole families, is the freeze dance. But I know there were questions. So if there's questions, we're happy to take them.
So my question was more in the last little segment, and it's kind of like a parenting/family dynamic question. So as a parent, how do you navigate protecting one child's privacy from the rest of their siblings and fostering a healthy, open dynamic with the whole family?
Oh, we have individual conversations. That's how we do it in my house. So if one of my kids are in talking to me about something serious, this is probably not the best way, but I'm like, bye. I'm a mom of five. So if I'm having a conversation with my oldest and my other kids come in, I'm like, bye. Like, you don't get to be here. I'm sorry. Right now I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to your sister, or I'm talking to your brother. I'm sorry, you don't get to be a part of this conversation right now. What was the second half of your question?
Well, it was just kind of like balancing them having their own, I guess, like helping each other sort of dynamic. You know what I mean? Like fostering an openness between the whole family, and then also maintaining that privacy.
In my house, unless it's a family meeting and it's something super serious, my husband and I, we create the environment for our kids to come and talk to us individually. We really do. I mean, I think if it's important, I think my husband and I will have the conversation with that particular child, but we start from young. Like, we start from when they're little kids. Like, you can talk to mom and dad about any and everything. Even if we are going to be upset with you, come and still be able to talk to us. Now, you as a female, there's things that you're not gonna wanna talk to your dad about. And that's okay. That's okay, right? What I tell young ladies is go talk to your mom. If you can talk to your mom, and maybe say, mom, like, it's okay if you talk to dad about this. Or mom might say, you know what? I can't keep this between me and you. Like, I gotta tell your dad. And you're gonna have to be okay with that, right? Because you also want open communication and trust. So if you can't trust your dad to tell him something, we might need to talk about why that is, right? But no, like, there's things that you're gonna feel extremely comfortable talking to mom about. Go talk to mom and say, mom, you know what? It's gonna be hard for me to talk to dad about this. Can you talk to him about that? And my kids, like my oldest son, he goes to my husband all the time, right? And again, I have to be okay with that because there's gonna be things he's not gonna wanna talk to me about. And I have to make that okay, right? And if you feel like you can't talk to your parent, please go to your youth leader, your youth pastor, go to, I don't know if you guys, we call them church mothers. Go to one of your church mothers, right? And be able to talk to them about whatever it is. And let your parents know, like, mom, like, I wanna be able to talk to you. Like, it's my desire to be able to have a good relationship with you and be able to talk to you about anything. It's hard for me to do that sometimes when this or this and this happens. And then that's gonna be mom's responsibility to say, you know what, I'm not creating a safe environment for my child to come and talk to me. I have some work to do. I have to pray for God to open my heart and soften my heart and open my eyes to see that my child needs me in this way. God, help me to be able to do that. Make sense?
So when parents ask me when do I talk about when do I have the talk, right? I tell them you talk to them at their level, right? And every kid is different, so it's not like I have a template for like at 5 you say this, at 6 you say this, right? But you talk to them at their level. You use real words. You don't use euphemisms. Right? You need to use real words so that they are clear and you are clear about what you're sharing with them. And you also, and this is a hard line to walk, but you also don't want to make them feel bad for answering those questions. You have to be able to manage your own reaction. Because usually those questions, it's a good thing they're asking you. It's a good thing they're asking you, right? You want them to ask you those questions. And so your response is going to make sure that they keep asking you those questions, so that they keep feeling safe asking you those questions. So let them come to you with those questions. Keep your kids off of YouTube. It is the worst thing ever. I don't know how, all of my boys that I see, all of the little, and I love boys with ADHD, so I have a lot of them on my caseload. They have all been exposed to things they should not see because of YouTube. And their parents are lovely. Most of them have very responsible, on top of it, parents, and they just didn't realize. Tell your congregants to delete YouTube. I know you can see things on there that are like fun and good, and if you're watching it as a family, great, but if your child has access to a tablet and the kid safe stuff is on, they will find the wrong stuff. Because YouTube has these horrible algorithms, and they play ads, and all it takes is that kid to hit an ad, and it opens something else, and then it opens something else. 9 times out of 10, it's not the kid looking for this stuff. It just pops up. YouTube is evil. Don't let your kids have YouTube, ever, 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 ever. Or Snapchat, or TikTok. Yeah, so bad, but have the conversation. So that when they see those videos, because trust me, they will see the videos, they know that they can come and talk to you and ask questions.
I think when you're discussing relationships, I think that has to start again as young as you can go. And I think it's just with the friends. Like, explain to them why kids are bullies. Like, feel bad for that child because they are lacking something. Maybe their mommy isn't there for them. You know, like, the more that you break it down for them, because they need that clear-cut breakdown of why. I mean, I have high schoolers that I work with that don't understand why a person is a bully, you know, and that's an issue. But I also think developing them at a young age of what a healthy relationship is, so that they avoid domestic violence later on. Because again, there's so much. I have a freshman last year, first relationship, and it's domestic violence. And I told her straight up, I'm like, this is domestic violence. He can't talk to you like this. He can't take your phone and not give it back to you. Like, this is not okay. This is not normal. But who's in their life to break that down for them, you know? And so I think just even in my best self, like, I'll tell my kids when I reacted wrong, you know, because again, I'm the flesh, and that whole spiel about redheads and tempers is true, you know? Like, I've come a very long way, but I still, when there's times where I look back and I'm like, mommy should not have said that to you. I shouldn't have done that. I'm human too, and I'm trying just as hard as you are, because they need to know too their value. Like, I can't tell them, don't let somebody talk to you like that, and then I talk to them like that. You know what I mean?
So that's a really good point. And this is something that I have to transfer over to my private practice, but when I worked in the elementary school, all of my fifth graders, all of the fifth graders that were on my caseload, we did a group. We did it for the entire school year, and we talked about what healthy relationships and healthy friendships look like. So we tackled both. So as they transition into middle school, they have an understanding of, okay, this is a healthy friendship, healthy relationship, or this is an unhealthy one, and how it even gets there. I tell kids, hurting people hurt people. I tell them that from elementary school. Like, so when there is someone who is bullying, they have a framework to be able to go back to be able to be like, okay, something must be going on outside of here that's making the child react that way. I think it's how it's presented. But That also ties into the generational trauma and the generational curses that Rachel talked about, right? Because if we have a family that's in breakdown, and I believe in that, right? If we can go back and we can look at family history to see where there was some of those traumas and see where there was some of that breakdown, unfortunately, it's going to come to a point where you're right, basic morals and values and discipline, it's not going to be taught in the home because of the trauma that goes from way back, that goes from way back when, right? So what I usually tell, because I do work with some in the geriatric population, what I tell them is, it's okay for you to teach these things, but you have to bring it into a way today where the youth can receive it. It has to be brought to them. And so I'm from Barbados. My parents don't play that. They didn't play that when I was growing up, right? But one of the things that my father is now learning is that, one, I'm an adult, but two, his parenting had to shift. His parenting, had to shift and change. And the way that I parent my kids, I'm still raising them on biblical principles. I'm still raising them to have respect and morals and values. But the way I present it to them has to be a little bit different. I can't present it to them with this iron fist of this is what it is. Right? I have to show them why. Why do you need to be respectful? Why do you have to have a sound core belief system? Why am I raising you on God's principles? Why am I raising you on the foundation? Why am I raising you on the rock? Because as you get older, you're now going to bring all of these things into your parenting, and that trauma stuff is going to die back there. Right?
Yeah. No, this has been absolutely amazing. I want to thank our panelists, whatever you want to call yourself, for all the information. This really has been great and informative and necessary, as we said at the beginning. I just want to step up here, and we're going to officially shut this down and close it down. But as they mentioned, they're going to stay here as long as you all need if you want to ask questions and talk amongst ourselves. But I just want to make sure everyone know that we're going to officially close this so people can go back, and we all want to get ready for tonight and everything. But thank you. Let's give them a round of applause for all of the research that they put into this and the time that they've done for creating this opportunity. Thank you all for showing up. It shows that this is something that's needed, the crowd that shows up and everything. So thank you all. And, we're looking forward to tonight. God's going to continue to do great things. And we're looking forward to what God is going to do from this starting point on this conversation.